So the marginal cost is the increase of the total cost that arises from an extra unit of production. So as you can see, we're starting to see a pattern here. Average total cost tells us the cost of a typical unit of output, and the marginal cost tells us the cost of an additional unit of the output. So if you subtract the two, it will give you the percentage or the cost of one additional unit. As you can see, you have many cost curves in your figures, and I want you to look through those and just be familiar with them and make sure that you're familiar with the terms, not so much the numbers that go into them. We talk about rising marginal cost. Why does this happen? This occurs because of diminishing marginal product. At low levels of output, there are few workers and a lot of idle equipment. But as output increases, the cost of producing another unit of the output becomes high. So that leads us into the U-shaped average total cost. The average total cost and the sum of the average fixed cost is added into the average variable cost. So the average fixed cost declines as that output exceeds the average variable cost, typically increases as output expands. The average fixed cost is high when output levels are low, and output expands as the average fixed cost declines, pulling the average total cost down. As fixed costs get spread over a large number of units, the effect of the average fixed cost on the average total cost falls, and the average total cost begins to rise because of the diminishing marginal product. This leads us to the efficiency of scale. The efficiency scale is the quantity of output that minimizes the average total cost. This is the relationship that we will examine between marginal cost and average total cost. Whenever we see marginal cost is less than average total cost is falling. Whenever marginal cost is greater than average total cost is rising. The marginal cost curve crosses the average total cost curve at the minimum average of total cost, which leads us to the efficient scale. So marginal cost will eventually rise with output. You'll see the average total cost is a U-shaped. Marginal costs cross average total cost at the minimum of average total cost. Costs in the short run and costs in the long run will have advantages to either one. We'll have to examine both of them and to see which ones are best fit to make the assumptions that we need to make. The division of total cost into fixed and variable costs will vary from firm to firm. Some costs are fixed in the short run, but all variables in the long run. For example, the long run, a firm could choose the size of its factory. Once the factory size is chosen, the firm must deal with the short run costs associated with the plant and its use and its size. The long run average total cost curve lies along the lowest points of the short run average total cost. Because the firm has had more flexibility in the long run, because they have more time to deal with it, than they would to have in the changes in productions of the short run. There's an example of that in your PowerPoint and in your chapter readings. The long run average of total cost is typically U-shaped. The curve is generally U-shaped, but is much flatter than in the typical short run on average of the total cost curve. The length of time the firm has to get the long run will depend on how much the firm is involved. This will lead us to economies and diseconomies of scales. So let's talk about the book definition of economies of scale. It's the property whereby long-run average total cost rises as the quantity of the output increases. So what this leads us to is economies and diseconomies of scale. Let's first look at the definition the book gives us. Diseconomy of scales is the property by where the long-run average total cost rises as the quantity of the output increases. Economies of scale is the property whereby the long-run average total cost falls as the quantity of the input increases. This then leads us to the constant returns of scale, which is where the property whereby in the long run average total cost stays the same as the quantity of output changes. If you remember Adam Smith's Wealth of the Nations, he talked about how specialization in a factory allowed output to be greater than it would have been if each worker attempted to perform many different tasks. This use of specialization allows firms to activate economies of scales. Please make sure you're familiar with economies of scales and diseconomies of scales and constant returns of scale. So by the end of this chapter, we should already have been looking at what items are included in a firm's cost of production, the link between the firm's production of the process and its total cost, the meaning of the average of total cost and marginal cost and how they're related, the shape of a typical firm's cost curves, the relationship between short run and long run, and also the goal that firms use to maximize profit, which equal total revenue minus total cost. All right, when analyzing the firm's behavior, it is important to include all of the opportunity costs of production. Some of the opportunity costs, such as wages that are paid by a firm to its workers, are explicit. Other opportunity costs, such as wages that the firm owner gives to itself by working at the firm rather than taking another job and making money, are implicit. So remember when we talk about the difference between economic formulas and economic patterns of way of making assumptions and predictions versus the accounting formulas and predictions and assumptions. Economics profits take both explicit and implicit costs into account, whereas accounting profits only consider explicit costs. So make sure you know the difference between the two. A firm's cost reflects its production process. A typical firm's production function gets flatter as the opportunity or the quantity of an input increases, displaying a property of diminishing marginal return. As a result, the firm's total cost gets steeper as the quantity of the produced rises. A firm's total cost can be divided between fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are costs that do not change within the firm's as it alters the quantity or the output is produced. Variable costs are costs that change when the firm alters the quantity of output produced. So the more they produce, the more that it changes. For a firm's total cost, two related measures of cost are delivered. Average total cost, which is the total cost divided by the quantity of the output, and also the marginal cost, which is the amount by which the total cost rises if the output increases by 1 unit. So when we're analyzing the firm's behavior, it's often useful to use graphs and the total cost and the marginal cost. For the typical firm, marginal cost rises as the quantity of output increases. Average total cost first falls as output increases and then rises as the output increases even further by additional units. The marginal cost curve always crosses the average total cost curve at the minimum of the total average cost. So, a firm's cost often depends on the time of the horizon considered. In particular, many costs are fixed in the short run, but the variables are changing as it moves to the long run. As a result, when the firm changes the level of production, average total cost may rise in the short run more than it would in the long run. So it is possible for owners to have different goals, but the one motive for all firms, or it should be for all firms, and what makes sense is to have accurate predictions and assumptions to the firm's managers to believe that they are making the profit as maximum as possible. So what you're looking for when you're looking at these graphs and you're looking at these formulas is the end result is to have approximate profit maximization. For the firm to succeed and grow and to continue to move forward, it has to be productive and meeting its goals, specifically in the finance.